Welcome back to another episode of Designing Hollywood. I am your host today, Alex Gettlin, and we have a very special guest joining us. His career has spanned over 42 years as a costume designer. He is one of the most beloved, skilled, and innovative designers working today with a career that encompasses contemporary, fantasy, and period costumes. Everyone, please welcome Eduardo Castro to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
So I always love interviewing creatives and artists. I'm a creative myself, and I love to just pick brains and understand how you got here. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you become a costume designer?
You know, it's interesting. When I was a kid in the 50s, there used to be a television program, an afternoon television program called Art Linkletter's House Party. It was kind of, an afternoon talk show. And every so often on that talk show, you'd have Edith Head. And then Edith Head would come out and she would say, I just finished this movie, A Girl Named Tamiko. And then she'd bring out her fashions and her sketches and all that. And I go, wow. And I think that's one of the first times I knew about the business, knew about the business. And I must have been maybe 10 or 12 years old. And back then I started collecting little index cards and doing little figures by myself, right?
Sure.
So that was just a little hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Then you do high school, and
right.
And then you. I wasn't sure what to do after high school. There's no counseling for what we do.
Right.
There's like,
of course,
you have to sort of find your way organically. And so I was at LA City College.
Okay.
And the first year, it's like you're taking all these classes that are prerequisites. You have to take this,
right.
you have to take that. The second year, I started branching out and taking classes that interested me. So there were art classes and there was a theater class. But what happened during that time, my father was a surgeon and he was working downtown by the Pabst Brewery. He had an office there. And his medical group took care of the music center. And so they took care of anybody was sick. And if any actor was sick at the music center, they would go to him. And then one day my father comes home and says, my nurse says her daughter got a job at the music center. And I think you should apply. And it was being an usher. Yeah. Okay. I had never seen a play, a musical, a ballet, an opera. I had never seen it. And so this job was a blessing because I started, I remember, December 1st, 1970. And the first thing I saw was a production of an opera by the New York City Opera. And my eyes just popped. I said, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. And I was stationed in the balcony in the economy section, right? And as I moved forward in that job, plus going to school, I would see at the same time, there was a play by Mart Crowley, who was famous for The Boys in the Band. He had done a play that wasn't very, very good called Remote Asylum, and that was playing at the Amundsen. And there was something about it. I couldn't tell if it was a good play because I had no experience.
Oh, okay, right, I see.
I had no experience whatsoever. And I remember sitting in the lobby one day and out of the theater comes Gregory Peck. And I was doing my homework. I was reading a book. And he comes up to me and he says, that is the biggest piece of crap I've ever seen on stage. And I sort of said, what? And I said to myself, you're Gregory Peck and you're talking to me.
Yeah.
And I was like starstruck because he was talking to me like a normal person, and I wasn't used to that. I was like, "This is Gregory Peck. You're a big star. You're an Oscar winner, and you're talking." And what was great about it was he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm reading this book, The Brothers Karamazov." He said, "Well, that's a good book. Keep it up. Keep it up." And what was interesting about that whole situation, we talked for about 10 minutes, was every time he would come to the music center, he always winked at me. But that was the beginning of my relationship with celebrities, I suppose, and watching all of this stuff happen. And as I moved into the theater department at LA City College, I became more interested in the theater and actors and designing. And when I was impressed at the Music Center, at the Mark Taper or at the Amundsen, I always would look at the bios of the designers, the set designers, and at that time in the 70s, it was like I wasn't sure where to go from LA City College. I knew I had to make a jump. I knew I had to go somewhere and I would spend my times in the counseling office looking over catalogs of books and said, where can I go that I can learn set design and stage design?
Okay.
And there were very few schools back then, very few. I think Brandeis was one, Boston University, and then Carnegie Mellon was the other one. The interesting thing about the bios that I would look at, I would say 80% of the bios, all the designers were coming out of Carnegie Mellon. And I said, I don't know. I thought, what is it? This famous school in New York? I have no idea. I found out it was in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I applied, and I got in, and it was wonderful because at LA City College I got a terrific education. If anyone is unsure, I always think, community college is fantastic.
Sure.
I actually got some really, really good art classes in and theater classes, and it prepared me for Carnegie. Carnegie was different. When I went to Carnegie, it was, very, very elite. Sure. But we worked. I was there for 3 years, and then I wanted to go to Yale for graduate school, but Carnegie Mellon offered me to do it in 1 year because I was an undergraduate. So I went and it was the classic situation. I learned history, cutting, swatching. I learned all of the things that you need to learn in that classic structure, which really a lot of designers don't have that. One of the most famous designers and one of the most wonderful people that I mentored with, who I just spoke to in Rome 2 days ago, is Malayana Cananero, who has 4 Academy Awards, and her first Academy Award, I think, was for Barry Lyndon, and then she won one for Chariots of Fire, then she won one for Marie Antoinette, then Grand Budapest Hotel. Her resume is unbelievable. Out of Africa, Dick Tracy.
Sure.
It goes on, and it seemed like every event, that every movie that she did was like an event.
Right.
Midnight Express. They're all kind of like
these epic films.
Yeah. And I became very close for her, and I'll talk to you later about her. But what one thing she said to me, she said, Eduardo, I never had the education you had. She started out with Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick picked her out for some reason, and they had there was something there that he nurtured. And I remember she said he gave her a camera, go scout locations. I think she was 18 years old or something, and so she did that. And I think there was a hunger there, and along with the hunger, I think that Stanley Kubrick appreciated the passion. So I think it's one of those things when you meet directors, you meet producers, they'll either get you or they don't, and they see the path. And so, her first movie was Clockwork Orange, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right? That's
first job. Wow.
First job, right. So
what a home run.
I know. But anyway, getting back to what happened to me was, okay, so I graduate from Carnegie Mellon. I do a big giant thesis, which it's interesting because nowadays I've been mentoring the students from Carnegie Mellon. It's not as rigorous as when I was there. It's a lot softer, let's say. But I came out and I was classically trained.
I see.
Then I moved to Western Costume Company.
Okay.
And where I was making $2.35 an hour, right?
Oof.
And it took me, I forget how many hours to get $100, but it was something like 50 hours or something. Anyway, so I was
too long.
It was a great experience back then. I come out, I have a master's degree, and I'm taken over to the head of the stock area, where once you're at Western, the first few months you're sort of like relegated to putting stuff away. So you're supposed to know it had 6 floors, and where does everything go, and you learn about periods, you learn about spacesuits, pirates,
Right.
all kinds of things. Where's this? Where's that? Where you learn about period concierges, hotels, and the little cross. You learn all these tremendous
fascinating.
details, right? So my first job, and I was quite happy because I had been fried from doing a very intense thesis.
Sure.
It was very big, and so I was fine with like, just tell me what to do for a minute, And so it was July of 1977. And my first job was I'm taken out in the back of Western Costume Company, and there was a cement courtyard, and there was a 240-foot trucks back there. And my job was to unload those 2 trucks.
Wow. Yeah.
Wash it down, wash the costumes down. It was a mess. It was Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God.
Right. It was Apocalypse Now.
It's like having you like pledge your rights into
exactly. So there I am, scrubbing boots, hosing down uniforms that had come from the Philippines. Lord knows what was on them. It was just,
Wow.
and the thing was, I didn't mind doing that.
Sure.
I realized this is where I got to start somewhere.
Sure.
So my next job was like putting the armor in order, and that was horrible. They gave me all the most horrible jobs.
Yeah.
But I think they did it on purpose, and I think they did it to teach me a lesson, because I was the only one there with a master's degree.
Right.
And so I did what I was told, and then little by little I would take lunch.
Sure.
And I would have a sketchbook, and then I would draw. And certain people began to notice, and oh, this guy can draw. Yeah, he can draw. And people started mentoring me. People started giving me the chance to move forward. And so once, after you spend your time, your condemned time of putting all that shit away and all the low stuff, you get moved up into an office, and then you get assigned, Patrick, what's his name, is going to come in. What was his name? He was an actor on Dallas.
Duffy?
Patrick Duffy.
There you go.
He's coming in, and he needs some pieces for the man from Atlanta. So you help him. So I helped him out. And it was like, and then the next job, and then you would get more and more. And as I moved, there were these big designers, huge, like Anne Roth, who is still around. She's 88 today or these days, and she's got like a couple shows on Broadway. She's got Ma Rainey's Black Bottom coming out. She hasn't stopped. She does 2 or 3 films a year. It's like she hasn't stopped. Anyway, she sort of grabbed hold of me and said, oh, I want Eddie to pull my shows. So I would pull shows for her. And then, I helped her on a show with Michael Caine called The Island. And we dressed him for the Oscars. And I learned so much from her.
Yeah.
She was one of those people that was so incredibly successful. And the reason she's successful is she has an amazing amount of confidence. When she walks into a fitting, she's very confident. She she sells it. The actors like it. The producers like it. She's been around, so she knows.
Sure.
She knows how to play the game.
Right.
At the same time, I also met another designer. Her name is Theodora Van Runkel. And Theodora Van Runkel also had an amazing career. Her first movie was one of the best debuts of all time. It was Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Wow.
So she started on Bonnie and Clyde. Then she was exclusive with Faye Dunaway for a while. And then she did one of the Godfathers, and she was with Coppola for a while.
Yeah.
And she was completely different. She was more artistic. She was more lyrical. She was my Auntie Mame. She would, we met. And again, she was one of those people, oh, I want Eddie to pull this for my shows and this and that. So, and then well, I remember one afternoon and she said, Eduardo, come, let me counsel you. Let me take you up to my office. And she would sit at her office and she'd be painting. She had a lot of things that she was painting. And she was also one of the best illustrators in the business. She
Yep.
was her drawings are amazing. And she taught me a lot about life and a lot about, like Auntie Mame.
Yeah.
She would sit me upstairs and she would review, and she said, you need to read this. This is a good book for you to read, or this is a great art book to look at. She would lend me
Sure.
art books. And at 3:00 says, now, Eduardo, or actually it was Eddie back then, because everybody called me Eddie back then. We must now take a break, and you must learn to sip Pernod at 3:00 in the afternoon. I didn't know it was,
Yeah, right.
and so I'm drinking Pernod with her.
Very fancy.
The point is, you have Anne, who is very no nonsense, very, very direct,
Totally.
very, very successful in a way. And then you have Theodora, who is very ethereal. She thought she was Isadora Duncan reincarnated.
Right.
I mean, she was
Sure.
she was always dressed exquisitely and
Very extravagant.
extravagant. And Anne was the pencil skirt, the white shirt, the pearls, and the
Totally.
glasses,
All business.
all business. And what I learned is you can't be taught. You can't
Interesting.
be taught. And also,
Yep.
and I've had this conversation with Marilyn, and also I worked with designers that really, I knew more than they did. I got a call one day when I was right after I'd left Western from a designer named Patricia Edwards, and she was Blake Edwards' ex-wife.
Okay. Yeah.
And Blake had given her a chance on a movie called 10. He said, I'm going to give you 10. And so she has a lot of style. She has a good eye. But she was preparing a film that was period 1890s, and she really didn't know. She called me up and she said, can you help me? I said, sure. And what was great about her was she allowed me to help her. And the project was big piece of crap. What was it? Tarzan the Ape Man with Bo Derek.
Wow.
And but it was period, so we had to do all that. And then there were designers that were either not very nice and not very good with actors, and I would sit in there fitting. And you learn from that too. You learn an awful lot, like, oh gosh, I mean,
what not to do.
What not to do, really. I had a designer, and there was an actress, and it was a rather important film for the actress because she won this role over Julia Roberts. And I remember the designer, the actress was late. She had a lot of appointments, and there was a lot going on with her. And the designer just yelled at her and said, "Here, put these on." And she broke down. The actress broke down while the designer went to the bathroom. And I sat down and talked to her. And the actress was Bridget Fonda. And I talked to her and I said, let's just go at a pace where let's just try on only what you need to try. And I decided to have a conversation with her. She was in need.
Sure.
She was in need. And actors, before we talked about this, actors are such an important part,
of course,
of what we do.
Yeah.
And what I learned throughout the years, stepping up through the years. I remember one actor I was working with, Charles Bronson, on a movie. It was called Cabo Blanco, who was working with one of the most famous designers of all time. His name is Bill Trevia. Okay. And Bill Trevia was famous for Marilyn Monroe. He did the white dress.
Yeah.
He did he didn't do Some Like It Hot, but he did a lot of Marilyn Monroe's clothes.
Sure.
He won an Oscar when he was like in his 20s. He'd done a lot of, he did Valley of the Dolls. And I was so upset when we were in the fitting and Mr. Bronson was misbehaving and threw these jeans in his face, in the designer's face. And it's like, what do you do? How do you do that? And Bill Trevia just took it as a gentleman, and he didn't do anything. But you have to be aware of a lot of situations with actors. Some are. It's interesting. I have found that the bigger the star, the easier they are sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Totally. Yeah.
I had that with Sean Connery, with John Travolta, with Mel Gibson. They were all they were easy.
Total professional.
They're fine. The hard one is the person that's number 6 on the call sheet that wants to be number 1.
They want to be number 1, right?
So,
they're overcompensating.
But you know, that's one thing that you learn. That's one thing that you learn, you know. And so Western was a tremendous place where I learned a lot. But one of the things that right now I've been mentoring a lot of students and a lot of people wanting to come into the industry.
Right.
So I always have a question for them. I said, 2 questions. I said, what is your dream?
Sure.
Do you have a dream? And who are your heroes?
Interesting.
And it's fascinating, but so few have very many heroes. And they'll say the same people. Usually it's Colleen Atwood or Sandy Powell. And you know, they're fantastic. They're amazing. They're at the top of their game. They're wonderful. But so many of them don't have that. And when I was coming out of school and going into Western, there were 3 designers I admired. One was Anne Roth, who we spoke about. One was Theodora, which I spoke about. And the other one was Malayana Cananero. And when I was at Western, I thought, oh, my dream would be just to say hello, to meet them, to shake their hand.
Sure.
Would be a dream come true.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for me, who admired these people's work. I mean, these were giants in the industry. And what happened was, not only did I get to meet them, I worked with each and every one of them.
Wow.
And so they were all instrumental, all very generous. And I say this to kids coming out: don't be afraid to approach someone you really admire, but really admire.
Right.
And Malayana was one. To this day, she still has more confidence in me than I do. But it's important as you go up the ladder. I was blessed in that, like Marilyn said, I met a lot of key people, a lot of very, very important people. Wayne Finkelman was another one. Dorothy Jenkins, who did the 10 Commandments and all these movies in the 50s, and also the first woman to win an Oscar for costume design. And Julie Weiss, a lot of people. So a lot of people knew me as I was growing up and as I was going on. So they, Eddie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so the thing about our business, and the thing about, I think, what's important about our business, and I think Marilyn and anybody else will tell you, it's really who you know.
Absolutely.
And you could be the most talented, and it's true with actors, it's true with directors, it's true with everybody across the board. All of a sudden, if you hit that lucky spot where somebody saw you before, or recommended you, or knew something, boom.
Yeah.
That's nothing you can teach.
Right. It's character.
It's character, and also I think people wanting to work with you.
I'm glad you said that. I was just thinking
there was
that.
a wonderful designer named Patricia Norris, who was phenomenal. She did Days of Heaven. She did a lot of Westerns. And then she was a collaborator with David Lynch. And she did production and set design. And one day she was at Western. And this was when I was I was like 30 years ago. And she'd say, "Oh, how can I get a cute guy like you to work with me?" I said, "Just ask." But I think what it is people want to be around people that are positive, or people want to be around people that you can be inspired.
Absolutely.
By a student. And in fact, I was very inspired by a student quite a little while ago. I did 2 Zoom meetings with 2 colleges. And one was Carnegie Mellon, my alma mater.
Sure.
And I did a 60-minute Zoom meeting. And I asked the question, "What are your dreams for your
Sure.
And it was interesting because here are students spending like $200,000 on an education. It was like huge. And there seemed to be very little ambition or direction or passion.
Yeah.
And I'll get to the point of the story. So
Sure.
4 weeks later, I do the same thing with LA City College. At LA City College, you're paying $150 for a class. It's much different.
Yeah, of course.
But what I found very interesting, so I went there in person and I held, and our 90-minute class turned into 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And they knew everybody. Those kids knew who was designing Handmaid's Tale, who was doing Game of Thrones. They had heroes.
Sure.
And they had dreams.
Yeah.
And I just said, wow, what is it about this school? And I think it was about people that really, number one, couldn't afford it.
Sure.
But had a passion.
Right.
So what's interesting is I left the meeting, right? And as I was leaving, I was going into the parking lot, this Latino boy came up and said to me, "Mr. Castro." I said, "Yes, I was in that meeting you were with." I said, "I have to thank you because before you came, I didn't think my dreams could come true." Because what
That's
it
amazing.
is, because there's no clear path
Absolutely.
to how to do what we do. There's no
Right.
clear path. He was working at Nordstrom's in the makeup counter,
Yeah.
trying to do something creative
Sure.
and trying to connect.
Yeah.
And so he called me, he talked to me and said, thank you very, very much. Now cut to 2 months later, and I'm on the board of the Television Academy, and there's an internship.
Okay.
So we look at the portfolios from a lot of kids, and from Yale, from Carnegie Mellon, from Emerson,
Sure. These
from
amazing
UCLA,
schools, yeah.
everybody.
Right.
Because it's a paid internship,
Okay.
and it's a 6-week internship,
Yep.
and they get to learn the business. And
Sure.
so we look at the portfolios, and 4 finalists. Each finalist
Mm-hmm.
came from the same school,
Interesting.
LA City College.
Wow.
The lowest, they had the best prepared
They
portfolio.
had the drive.
They had the drive.
Yep.
And also, and it was like, I just found it fascinating. But the whole point of this story is the person that won the internship was that boy that talked to me.
I love it.
That-
That is
that-
so
that-
fun.
that said,
Yeah.
Now my dream, and he's working in the industry, and he's now worked with Lou Eyrick, and he's worked with all these people.
It's amazing.
He's still a production assistant, but he's moving
on his way.
He's moving in a direction, and that's the thing about what we do. When I was at Western and I was making that $2.35 an hour, and I still had to get that design itch out.
Sure.
And so I would do design work for all these 99-seat theaters. One of them was in North Hollywood Group Repertory Theater, and I did a lot of work, and I didn't get paid,
Right.
but there's something about, as an actor, the community.
Of course.
It's the community. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you get paid $90 or $900 or $9,000. You're
not what it's about.
You're doing something.
Yes.
You're doing something.
Yes.
And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to do that. And the point is, I get all these calls from students from all across, I want to work in the film and TV industry, and I want to do,
Sure.
and I go, well, you got to start out, and it's basically doing returns.
Yep.
It's
Mhm.
like this and that. Do you really want to do that? And I'll suggest you really, you're in between your like senior year, your junior year. Why don't you do summer stock? Oh no, I don't want to do summer stock. And I did summer stock, and that was like the
Yeah.
best thing in the world.
Of course.
But I don't know. I find that it's different these days. And every once in a while, you will get a student. Oh, this is an interesting story.
Sure.
Remember, I was talking about the Carnegie Mellon
Yep.
kids that
Mhm.
they were all graduate students.
Okay.
And the undergraduates weren't allowed to talk to me. I said, oh, that's, whatever.
Okay.
So a week after I get a call from an undergraduate. Her name is Carolyn Mizuka.
Okay.
She's wonderful. And I said, oh gosh, I don't want to, you kind of get it in your soul. Oh, do I need to talk to one more person? And they're just not, and I said, I'll have coffee with you. So I had coffee with her, and she was so different than the other students. She really, she showed me, said, this is what I want to do. And I said, that's great. This is wonderful. I immediately took her to my house, to my studio, and showed her books and said this, that, and the other. She came out and she immediately got a job being a production assistant with Julie Weiss, who is a very creative designer. Julie Weiss did Frida. She's done work for Terry Gilliam. She's been around forever. She's got a great body of work. She's a true artist. She's a real artist.
Great.
And she was with Julie for a while, paid her dues. Julie then in turn recommended her to do a gig at the Portland Shakespeare Company. Okay. So she's doing the regional theater thing. And that led to another gig at Arena Stage in Washington. And then another one at St. Louis Rep. And she calls me a couple of years later and said, am I doing the right thing? I'm not doing the PA work. I'm doing regional theater. I said, hey, you're becoming a designer.
Exactly.
You are building up relationships and you're building up networks. You never know. It's those directors that do theater that later on become something else.
Sure.
And what was so refreshing about her is she took a different route and she said, I'm going to do this.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Because a lot of people want to come out here and they immediately want to work with Colleen Atwood.
Right. Yeah.
And I go, I don't know if you're ready to work with Colleen Atwood.
Do you think that's more, you kind of touched on this, but more common these days than it was in your day? It seems like there's been a big uptick that people think they can just cut the line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's true because they don't want to do what I did. They don't want to sort shoes and they don't want. I had a conversation with someone who was highly recommended. She's in San Francisco. She came out of Carnegie Mellon and she worked on a film and she called me and said, oh, I want to get in the business, but I don't want a PA. I said, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
I said, but I told her this. I said, why don't you focus your eyes on being a production assistant, but if you're going to do it with somebody good.
Sure.
Do it on a big project. Do it on, something that's going to move you forward. Go with that in your head. But, once people get your rhythm, once people see your talent, you can,
Yes.
And I've moved people up. I remember they called me from Disney to do this sitcom that I couldn't do. And I had a friend of mine, not a friend, but a person. Her name is Julie Yang. I was doing some project. I can't even remember what, something. And she popped into my office and she said, I'll work for you. I'll work for you for free. And
that's how you know they want it.
Well, she was working in accounting in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
And she said, that's not for me. I said, okay. So I hired her to do a commercial and it was interesting. I said, okay, now should I put the clothes in the actor's room? Yes. Should I prep it? She knew what we do is common sense. It's not brain surgery,
right?
And so,
but I would imagine there's a lot of intuition you have to have.
There is a lot of intuition that you do have to have, and then what it's true because if you don't have it, you lose it. You just right. fall through the wayside. You could be the most talented designer in the world with the most amazing sketches and this, but if you don't have the communication skills,
right.
if you don't have that sense of seduction, that sense of confidence that I learned from Julie Weiss, because Julie Weiss was she is the craziest person on the planet, but she is amazing because she took me under her wing early on, and she was fascinating. She was amazing. She was just off the cuff. I was working with her on a project. I was supervising her first film, and she was designing her first film. It's like the blind leading the blind.
That's
I said,
funny.
I don't know what and so I remember we were on the truck, and the AD says, "Now, the janitors are playing the next scene. You ready for them? And she goes, oh, yeah, we're ready for them. And Julie just turns around to me. She's, go grab a Teamster, get $100, go to Sears and get some janitors. What size? I don't know, just get it. And it's like.
Just learning on the fly.
Yeah.
But that's some of the best training, I would imagine, in a way. Yeah.
Well, it is. Making mistakes, it is. And I tell young people, if you're going to make a mistake, don't be in the hot seat.
Right. Yeah.
Because then you'll never work again.
Right. That's fair.
But I made, oh my God, I made some real zingers. I remember once I was at Western Costume Company. It's the first and last time I'll ever do military.
Oh boy.
They sent me, I was doing a big movie called Hurricane with Mira Farrow, Jason Robards, Max von Sydow, Trevor Howard. It was a period, 1930 something, and it was being shot in Bora Bora. And I was working at Western, and I was in charge of all of the made to order. So I did all of Jason Robards. I did Max von Sydow. The designer was a very famous designer, Danilo Donati, who did a lot of Italian films like Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. Okay. And he, very, very grand.
Yep.
And he said to me, here are the drawings, here are the fabric, and I took over, which was great. But in the meantime, I got a telex. That's how old I am. This is before faxes and before whatever. And the telex read, we need 32 uniforms, winter dress Marines, right? And we need 32 of them and shipped to Bora Bora immediately. So I researched winter dress Marines 19 whatever, and it was heavy wool whatever, and I sent those out. There's no winter in Bora Bora.
Oh boy.
It's all tropical.
Of course, yeah.
I didn't know. And so the head of Western said that's their fault. It's like they weren't specific.
Right.
And so that was one mistake I made.
Sure.
And so I made a share of mistakes. I remember I was preparing the extras for a movie called, what was it? Postman Always Rings Twice with Jack Nicholson.
Yep.
And so I dressed all the extras, and we did that, and I put all the extras on the truck and all that, but I didn't secure the truck.
Oh,
so when they got to the set, everything was on the floor. It's like, and yet I think instead of getting yelled at, they said, it's like, but I'll never do it again.
Exactly.
And
now it's funny.
And now it's funny. And then you make, and I think that's part of the game. That's part of the game when you want to move forward.
Well, what I really like about all this, kind of just elaborating on your start and how you got here, it really highlights in this business, whether it be costume design or really anything that's this hard to achieve, right? Talent is important, education is important, but I think drive is really what gets you there.
Drive is very important. I didn't have as much drive as a lot of people. For the fact that I was talented, I took a lot of things for granted early on in my career. Sure. I could have started out much bigger, and the person that gave me my first big break in designing was Malayana, and she called me, and my name had been bounced around. They needed somebody to supervise Miami Vice, and I was working on Fame.
Yep.
Which was my first kind of big paying job. Or no, I wouldn't call it big paying. I would call it regular paying job,
Can I ask you, because it's always fun, like when you finally get that, like,
yes.
I'm really earning a living here.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you. What happened was, so I got Fame.
Yep.
And I was making good money, and I was on it for a year, and that's when I got the phone call from Malayana Cananero, and her assistant Richard Schisler called me and said, Malayana's looking for somebody, and we feel that you would be good. And I said, I'm not really a supervisor, I'm really bad at numbers and this and that and blah blah blah, and come and meet Malayana anyway. So I went and met Malayana, who is kind of the Anna Wintour of designers. Okay. She'll look at you and she will size you up in a minute.
Sure.
And so wow. I met her at a store in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
And this is the truth. She took a look at me. In less than 1 minute, she offered me the job.
Wow.
She didn't know anything. She said, I like you. I think yes.
What was that? I mean, was that just like validation, like right there? It's like, wow.
I think sometimes you see somebody and you gravitate towards them, and you feel that you just feel that there's a connection. And to this day, I just spoke to her like a few days ago, and she wants me to do something with her. And I go, okay, I'll do anything with her because she's great. So anyway, when I said to Malayana, I said, Malayana, listen, I'm not really a super. Oh, you can do it. And I said, but my dream is to design. And she said, she made me a promise. She said, if you do that one season as a supervisor, I will suggest you become the designer of the 4th season. And that's what happened.
Wow.
And so my first design job, because Fame wasn't a design job, it was a costuming job, but Fame was a design job. Right. And it was and that was a good paying job. I bought a car cash.
There you go.
I got my Rolex watch.
What kind of car was it?
It was in Miami, you gotta think it was a Firebird.
Nice. Okay.
Trans Am.
Sure.
And
it's fun,
but it was like $11,000 back then.
Right.
It was like,
yeah.
And then I got a watch, and then I got. I had been so financially restrained for years. When you're.
Do you think back to like cleaning up those trucks, and you're like, it's all worth it now?
Well, it is. I think it is, and I think you wouldn't trade those in the world. You wouldn't trade that in the world.
Absolutely.
Because. It was very interesting when I was at Western. There was a gentleman named Bill Alvarez who was upstairs, and he oversaw a lot of the ladies' clothes for the big designers. He held their hands, and he did like The Godfather and Cotton Club and all these huge, gigantic movies. Yeah. And somebody said, "Oh, this is Eddie. He's a costume designer," and he said the best thing ever, and it was the best. Not piece of advice, but the best quote. He said, he's a costume designer. And Bill Alvarez said, not yet.
Oh.
And I said, no, he's right. Not yet. Because it takes, yes, I can design. And it's just like when I when I go to schools and once upon a time, this. I said, listen, you could design once upon a time. You could sketch it. You could have your ideas much better than maybe what I can do. Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing. Not one of you could make it happen. Not one of you could make it happen. Because it takes years of networking, years of relationships. I took like $100,000 worth of fabric up to Vancouver.
Yeah.
On memo. I took, the kids, they want to be an assistant right away. And I go, when you assist a Colleen Atwood, when you assist a Sandy Powell, when you assist a Malayana Cananero, you have to be on a certain level. You have to know a lot. Yep. So it's not just, I want to, I said, there's years of stuff that took me years to figure out.
Absolutely.
So no,
Well, I would love to ask you some more about Once Upon a Time, because I know it's one of your biggest projects.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that must have been such an undertaking, right?
I'll tell you what happened. I was ready to quit the business.
Really?
Yeah. Marilyn has a story.
Okay.
I was working with this horrible producer.
Yeah.
She knows her. Horrible. It was a Lifetime show.
Okay.
And everything about it was bad. Everything about it. There was very little money. There was and less than money, there was very little support. Mm-hmm. And I was very overwhelmed. Yeah. And I was not having a good time. And in fact, I wanted to quit the business. I can't deal with this. I can't. The producer said to me, I want you to photograph five pieces of clothing, put them on the floor, and I'll choose what, and don't show them anything else. And I go, that's not how it works. Right. Because sometimes things that don't have a hanger appeal all of a sudden are magic, and you'll switch around something.
Sure.
So I was very, very, very depressed. And one day I get a call from production designer Mark Worthington, who I did Ugly Betty with. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm here in New Orleans, and it's like, I said, listen, I have a show, and I keep telling the producers there's only one guy that can do this, and it's you.
Yeah.
And it's a fairy tale. It's in Vancouver, and it's late in the game.
Sure.
very late in the game. This is 4 weeks before shooting.
Oh my gosh.
And they're having trouble getting a designer. Either the designers they hired, they didn't connect with the creators, or they were afraid of it, or they said it's impossible because there were 450 extras we had to do, plus all of the made to order.
Oh my God.
And so they said, can you do a phone meeting at 2:00? I said, okay. So I agreed to the phone meeting. And of course, something like Mercury's in retrograde. The fax machine isn't working. The script isn't coming out. I'm pulling my hair out.
Oh boy.
I have a PA in the car with me. I gave her, I'm at the parking lot of Burlington Coat Factory. And I said, go in there and get this stuff. I have to have a meeting now on the phone with these creators and these producers. And I think the director was a man named Mark Millard.
Okay.
And I think that what worked for Mark Millard was that I won 3 or 4 Costume Designers Guild awards over his wife,
Wow.
who was doing Entourage.
Yeah.
And so he said, oh, he must be good.
Right.
So
Sure.
So anyway, I talked to them on the phone and they said, what do you think? I said, well, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to do all this. I said, can you do it? I said, yeah, I think I can make it happen. I said, this is what I'm going to need. I'm going to need X amount of people, this. And they hired me on the spot. And I didn't do a presentation or anything. And I got to Vancouver and I wanted to cry. I left the other show 2 days early. They weren't happy, but off I go to Vancouver. Yeah. And there isn't a crew available. There isn't a single person available. And this is huge. They didn't
have anybody to support you?
Not a single person. And so I talked.
And there's 400 extras?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what happened. So one of the designers that they had interviewed, her name was Trish Monahan. She was really sweet. She said, I just can't. I don't see how anybody can do this. It's an impossible task.
Yeah.
The next day she calls me. She said, come here. I have something I want to tell you. I said,
Yeah.
what? Superman just folded. The Henry Cavill one, the first one.
Right. Yeah.
He said, that crew's available. I said, really? Go romance Jana, the supervisor. And, I called Jana. And she doesn't do television. And she'd, oh, well, I don't do TV and this and that. I said, but, can you help me out? I mean, I'll make it, I'll make sure you'll have a good time on it.
Sure.
So she came on. She brought me the A-list of cutters and costume makers and armor makers and assistants. And they all came out. And on top of that, when they said, you need to do a budget. I said, shit, man, I don't know. And Jana said, give it to me. Bum, bum, bum. She types up, and she brought up a budget and I looked at it and said, oh, they'll never go for it. That's very high for a pilot. It was almost $500,000. And usually a pilot's around $100,000.
Sure. Yeah.
And they said no at first. And then she went back to the producers and she had a way about her.
Sure.
She said, okay, if you don't want this, cut here, but you want all this and you have 3 weeks.
Right.
How are you going to make it happen? So they gave it to me.
Yeah.
They gave it to me. And Once Upon a Time became the easiest show I ever did for one reason. I did my job. I had a crew of about 35 people and they were top of the line. I'm having trouble with Prince Charming. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with Prince Charming. How am I going to make him special? And one of the assistants came up to me and she had worked. The beauty about Vancouver is they spent a lot of time doing big blockbusters with huge budgets and the craftsmanship was at a certain level. She brought this sari. Okay. It was very expensive sari. And she said, if you cut this up and you put this over the doublet, and I go, oh my God, I never thought of that. And it was a blessing. I was open to what their suggestion. Okay, that's done. Boom, boom, boom. Done. Bum, bum, bum. And it was the easiest show I ever did. Everybody said it was so big. I said, I don't know, but it was symbiotic. It just worked. Very rarely does everything come into place.
Right.
But all of the actors, he's one. That was one of the fittings that Eddie and Adam said, that's it. Don't do anything. It was the first thing we tried on. It was Indiana Jones. There you go.
There you go.
And everything worked, and it was beautiful. And for everybody who thought it was a very difficult show, it wasn't. It wasn't. And that had to be the trust from the network, the trust from the studio, the trust from the creators. And what happened was, once I got to Vancouver, they sent me back to LA to talk to the studio. So I talked to the studio. I do a little presentation.
Sure.
I have an assistant, and I bring in this huge bolt of white feathers. I said, "What do you think about this for Cinderella's dress?" And Snow White's dress. And I unfurled, and they said, "Oh my God, that's so magnificent." And what about this for the Evil Queen? It was black feathers with red. And they said, "Oh my God, that's great. What about black leather pants?" Boom, boom, boom. It all kind of came together. And so Steve Perlman, the line producer, said to me, "Okay, next week you got to do the network." I don't know. I can't tell the difference between the studio and the network, but I did the studio one day, and then go down to the network. We're going to send you down to LA, and you have to do exactly the same thing, because never in the history of ABC that you went to a meeting and there was not a note.
Oh my gosh!
I said, "What?"
But how did that feel when you heard that?
You know what? This is what it was. This is what it was, and it comes back full circle to everything. For years, we were doing T-shirt shows. I did Ugly Betty. That was modern. And then what happens is, all of a sudden, I get this show, and my thesis in college was a project called Candide, which was period. It was like, so all of that came easy to me. It was inside me. It was all inside me. All that, how to do this, how to do that. How are we going to cheat this, and how are we going to cheat that?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was doing the pilot, I said, I want these pieces that Bob Ringwood, who is a genius. Bob Ringwood is a little background on Bob, he did a movie called Dune and Excalibur, and genius, total genius.
Yep.
And so I knew his pieces at Warner Brothers. I said, I want that. I want this. I want that. And it all just came together.
Yeah.
I think what it was it was a lifetime of experience.
Definitely.
Hitting the mark when it was supposed to hit. Right. And, it's funny. I often say, shoot, if I had an interview for it, I probably wouldn't have gotten it. I don't know. I'm really bad at interviews,
I think you're doing great here.
No, but in meetings,
I understand.
It's like, oh God, you got to hit the nail on the head and this and that. And so Once Upon a Time was good. So, as was Ugly Betty, which was another one that I found easier to do.
Do you prefer modern stuff, or do you have...
Modern stuff is harder.
Interesting.
It's harder.
Well, why is that, you think?
Oh, I'll tell you. It's like on Once Upon a Time, they never questioned an evil queen. Never questioned, but they questioned a T-shirt.
Of course.
Jeans. Do you really these jeans? Can we try these other jeans? I said, yes, okay.
Yeah.
And the leather I remember the leather jacket for we had a black leather jacket. And the day before shooting, Eddie Kitsis said to me, do you think we could do red? I said, where am I going to find a red jacket? So I found a red jacket in the cheapest, sleaziest store in Vancouver. And we cut it apart and we fit it. And I think it was like $69, right?
Yeah.
And that became the jacket that Jennifer Morrison wore. Second season, it was a $4,000 jacket. The same thing, but it was like refined.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. We had it made by Ocean Drive. It was different, and blah, blah, blah. So, I think people ask me this all the time. Do you prefer period? Do you prefer modern? And this is my answer. I prefer a great script.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think that if you have a script that you can sink your teeth into and work with actors that you can relate to and they can relate to you, that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key. And gaining the actor's confidence is the I wouldn't say it's the hardest thing. I think it's the most important thing. And once you're there, you have half of your battle done.
Sure.
Harvey Keitel is a very interesting man. He's known for being, I don't call him difficult. He's a character actor.
Okay.
And I did 2 projects with him, or 3, I can't remember. One of the projects was he didn't have a line. He was it It was the remake of La Femme Nikita.
Okay.
And Marlene Stewart was the designer, and I had the pleasure of of dealing with Harvey. And he said, I don't know about this character, because in this movie he comes in and he kills everybody. He doesn't have a single. He's called the cleaner.
I see.
And so his clothes had to be rather anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to go into a restaurant, into a theater, into the city, and no one's supposed to really like. But the key for him were his shoes.
Okay.
And he said,
interesting.
Eddie, I can't do it without the right shoes, you know. And I admire Harvey so much. He's a little bit like Robert De Niro, who insists on fittings. He wants them. He'll be there for 3 hours, and he's got to get it right.
Yeah.
So we get the shoes right. It was great. It was wonderful. And but for an unseasoned costumer designer, it could possess a problem.
Sure.
It could. You need to know how to approach certain actors. Marissa Tomei is another one that I was told was very difficult, and I was told she was a handful. And my assistant had these wonderful words of wisdom, and she said, that was their experience. Why don't you?
Yeah, that's good.
I met her in New York, and I showed her these drawings, and we fell in love with each other. I don't know what it was. I understood that she's a character actress, so you listen to her. You listen to her. She had 55 changes. She was playing a Cuban refugee.
Got it.
And so what we decided to do, me and her, was to discover the character along the way and not do all of her changes right away.
Interesting.
And it worked for her.
Right.
It worked for her that way. And it worked beautifully. On the other hand, we had Angelica Houston, who is a different type of actress and kind of royalty in a way. And she's used to, certain things. And she was fantastic. And we did all of her changes all at once, but they were all very, not every actor is the same.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
I remember one time we had an issue with Jennifer Morrison, who was the lead in Once Upon a Time. And she only wore modern clothes. So the first fitting, my assistants are trembling in the back. They're like hearing the fitting room, and she goes, no. The rack of clothes, no, nothing in here works. I said, okay, fine. Why don't we take a breath and let's revisit this? I took into, but I said, but do me a favor. Can you try on this one jacket just to make sure I get the sizing right? And just, she puts it on. She looks in the mirror and she goes, well, this one isn't too bad. While I'm here, let me try the other one.
Oh man, yeah.
We got 6
you won her
jackets.
over. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you may not have if you had forced her.
Totally.
That's
Absolutely.
the thing. It kind of blocks it. So, and it's one of the. She's another one that was tough at first, and then she Vanessa Williams, she turned and became a champion of mine. But the thing about it is it takes quite a bit of experience
Absolutely.
to deal with not only actors but writers sometimes and directors that you don't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And
in your experience when you work with directors, is how often? I mean, I know they're all different, of course, but how often is it like they want to really be every little step of the way, giving their input, and how often they're like, "Hey, Eduardo, do your thing. We trust you."
I think it depends. I mean, when we worked with Steven Soderbergh, he was one of those people that, I mean, his production meetings were fantastic.
Yeah.
They were great. I'll tell you why, because we would be in a production meeting and it'd be 20 minutes. He said, you guys all know what you're doing.
Oh, that sounds like a dream. Yeah.
Right? And but that'll never happen.
Right. Yeah.
And he's one type of a director. Then when I worked with Robert Towne a little bit on the first go of the Two Jakes, the sequel to Chinatown, he wanted to know everything, but he was contributing to it because he was writing. And so you could get insight into what he felt, insight into how the tone of something. The creators of Once Upon a Time were very, very adamant and particular, but we had a great dialogue. They could call me up they could call me up and say, "Can we change this?" I said, "Yeah, you could." There's a way to work with people. And then once in a while, you're going to get a situation where nobody's happy, and sometimes that's a hard one. Warren Beatty was one of my favorites with when we did Bulworth. He was very, very trusting of Malayana designed it. I was the assistant, and he was in the film.
Okay.
So he has a hip hop outfit, and I liked what he did. We've been asking him, when can we fit this outfit? When can we fit it? He was busy directing and this and that. And that. Finally, the day came when we're going to fit him, or when we're going to shoot it.
Right.
They said, put everything in. He just took it out of the closet.
He didn't
which was a great way. We had the right selection of a few things. He just said, this is it. I mean, this is the way I want to do it. Yeah, I go into a closet, I pick out the clothes, boom.
There you go.
And sometimes that's what happens.
Right.
So, and I think, directors, film is a director's medium, although it's also now becoming more of a producer's medium. If you're working with Marvel, that's a whole different, that's a whole different market, and it's a whole different situation. If you're doing a small film, I did 2 small films with Meera Nair, the great Indian director. And, it depends. We had very little money. We had very little time. But she was also very interested. And I think that when you approach a project, there's so many elements involved. Sometimes you have a lot of time. Sometimes you have no time. I mean, once upon a time, I did in 3.5 weeks. Yeah, we did that in 3.5 weeks. We prepped it for longer. But I was helping out a friend of mine, Mayas Rubeo, a wonderful designer who was nominated for an Oscar last year. She did Jojo Rabbit, but she's done a lot of Marvel films. She did Thor, and she's doing this new film called WandaVision. And she asked me if I could come help her on there's a particular costume. I was on it for 4 months. One costume. It was going to drive me crazy. But that's because it's the Marvel machine, and there were specific concepts and approvals and this and that. Yeah. And it's a whole different way of working, and the budgets are completely different. And it's completely different than doing a movie out of the back of your car, which I've done, We've done those out of the back of my car. And so, I feel blessed that I have done all of those. Out of the car, I've done these big blockbusters where you have millions of dollars, to work on stuff.
So we are coming towards, we have to wrap it up soon. Before we do, I do want to make sure we mention our sponsor, Eddie Marks of Rag Vans. So
wonderful
thank you,
Eddie Marks, yes,
for helping make this show happen.
Absolutely.
I did also want to ask you, because I know that you've talked about and Starring Pancho Villa was one of the most satisfying projects of your career.
Yes.
I would love to hear more about that.
That was the most satisfying. Bruce Beresford is probably, and Marilyn loves Bruce. She worked with him as well, and she did Bonnie and Clyde with him. A gentleman, a fantastic man. HBO was wonderful. I had an unheard of 12 weeks to prepare. I had all the elements were there, and it was wonderful. And part of the thing, like when I think part of what nailed the interview was I had met Bruce before in Vienna, and we had spoken before. I really wanted it because I was Mexican. This was part of my heritage. I wanted to be part of this.
Sure.
And I think what cinched it for the producers was something very interesting. They said, okay, you've come up, we've had all these meetings. Now the thing is, how much do you think if this is going to cost? So in my experience, I said, okay, this is an HBO project. If this was a full-on movie, I'd say it's $1 million.
Right.
But it's HBO. I'm going to say 350, 375. And they said, that's the number we were thinking. And so what happens is you sort of know where you're going on these things. You sort of know. And that kind of cinched it in terms of what we did. And I remember Antonio, I had 20 minutes with Antonio.
That's it. 20
minutes. Yeah.
Wow.
And then he called me in the trailer, middle of the movie. He goes, Eduardo, this is the best costume I ever had. It's so, and there were no doubles.
Really?
That jacket is a jacket that I found at Universal, and we made his pants, we made his shirts. Those aren't even boots he's wearing. He's wearing half chaps, riding chaps with
interesting.
Payless shoes.
Yeah.
It was one of those situations, I think, that I got the greatest support from the producers and the director that I hadn't had in a long time. It was a beautiful project.
It's wonderful.
And I was happy to be part of it.
Just to wrap it up, I want to ask you one last question.
Yes.
So for anyone listening who's interested in getting into design,
Yes.
right? People coming up now,
Mhm.
what sort of, I mean, we kind of touched this in the beginning, but advice for them.
I think that, like I said, have a hero or two. If you like The Handmaid's Tale, or if you like Hollywood, or if you like anything that's been done, write to the designer directly. This is homework. You can find out their agents.
Yep.
Call the Costume Designers Guild, get their agent's number, write them a letter. In the letter, please state how much their work means to you. Designers have egos, and they just,
Sure.
it's like, they really like my work. Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
And I think that the best advice is go for it, and come out. I have several students coming out, and it's unfortunately this pandemic is hard and it's tough, but these new kids coming out, I have 2 or 3 that I think, okay, when you come out, what it is one person will lead you to another person. Maybe I don't have anything right now, but talk to my friend Daniel Orlandi, talk to my friend so-and-so, and maybe there'll be a connection. And but I'll tell you what, you will get there if you want it. You have to really want it. If you want it, it'll happen. If you don't want it hard enough, it may not happen for you. But you really, really gotta and it's true. Every designer that I've that's been interviewed and they ask that question, they all say the same thing. You really, really have to have that desire to want to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Eduardo, thank you so much for
You're
coming
welcome.
on Designing Hollywood. It has been such a
welcome.
pleasure to have you here. And listeners, thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that usual stuff, and we will see you next episode.
Thank you to our sponsor, Eddie Marks with ragvan.com. Ragvan is Hollywood's favorite place to rent fully equipped, high-quality trailers used by the entertainment industry to transport costumes and garments to and around filming sets in Hollywood. Also, thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and our YouTube channel for complete past and current episodes.